Another psychological influence on visual perception are visual constancies, which are kind of like those predispositions that exist in our mind that actually enable us to maintain a stable perception of a stimulus, although the image size on the retina may change. For example, if someone is walking towards you, it might look like they're getting bigger, but you actually know that they're not. Their size is staying the same. We're just interpreting it as getting closer. So our brain is using that cue of their changing size to tell you, well, oh, they must be getting closer, to help us make sense of what we're seeing. For example, you probably just interpreted that my hand stayed the exact same size, it just got closer to my camera, because you have that visual constancy, that size constancy of, well, I know that her hand is staying the same size, it just must be getting closer. So you actually use that as a depth cue. How interesting. So the other interesting thing is, like, the more familiar we are with a stimulus, the more likely we are to maintain a perceptual constancies. And visual constancies are usually learnt in childhood. And we need to be familiar with the thing to know what it should look like, so that we can have that constant, stable perception of it. So for example, most people are very familiar with roughly how big a hand is, so you can maintain that constancy. But if, for example, I saw an image of something that, like, I didn't recognize and I'd never seen it before, and if there was nothing else for me to compare it to and trying to like figure out the size of, like, I actually wouldn't be able to like know what size it should be, so I wouldn't be able to maintain that perceptual constancy. So again, that prior knowledge, it's different for every person, like different for people in different cultures and different families, that might vary as well. So to quickly reflect on these a bit more specifically, like we just talked about a few examples of, size constancy is that like ability to maintain a constant perception of an object. So it might seem to get bigger, but we just know it's actually getting closer. We don't change our perception of the object. We just use this changing size of the image to judge distance in this case, for example. Another one is shape constancy, which you might not have thought of as much before, but that's when we perceive an object to maintain its known shape, despite like the changing perspective from which it's observed. So for example, opening and closing a door. We actually maintain the shape constancy. I know that this door is still a rectangle. But the interesting thing is, when you open and close the door, it actually changes back and forth. Like the 2D image on your retina, as the door is like pushed away from you, it actually appears to become a trapezium. But we know it's still a rectangle. We just know that the door is being opened. I'd encourage you to try that later. Open and close the door and challenge your brain to think, is this a trapezium or is this a rectangle? Interesting trick for your brain. The other thing is brightness. The shade or brightness of something doesn't change even if the level of light it's exposed to changes. A really good example of this is your phone screen. If you are in like the blinding sun, you can like barely make out what's on your phone screen. But if you're in a dark room, like the light's probably going to blind you from your phone screen. But even though it seems to change, we have that visual constancy of, I know the brightness isn't actually changing, it's just my perception of it because of these external influences. It's very interesting.